Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a minute once we give everyone a chance to come on in from the waiting room. Kristen, do you want to go ahead and kick things off?
I would love to. Welcome, everybody. We're very excited to welcome you to the second panel that we've done together with resort operations. And I'll go ahead and introduce the guests here after a quick intro. My name's Kristen Carpenter, and my agency, Verde Brand Communications, represents SIA, and I love doing these panels and supporting the membership. So with that, quickly before we start, if you have any questions, you'll see at the bottom there's a Q&A option to the right on your screen. Feel free to put any questions that you would like to ask in there. We should have time to get to questions, no problem. So as we are literally at the precipice of the 2021-2022 winter sports season, we are no stranger to volleying these challenges and headwinds that COVID has dished our way and will continue to through this season. We've definitely gotten a PhD in resilience and learned to change course, often midstream. Most of all, we've learned to study and anticipate the needs of our consumer. Never before has our consumers' loyalty been up for grabs like it is through COVID and the pandemic. And with these four powerhouse states leading the panel today, we should get a great view of basically how consumers' expectations evolved through last year and how the states are planning to meet the needs and hopefully exceed the needs and demands of this consumer this year. So a lot to learn in the panel ahead. Despite navigating the incredible amount of change that we did last year, we had an incredible season. American resorts saw 59 million visitor days. That's visits by individual skiers, making it the fifth best season on record. And according to the NSAA, a record 10.5 million people, and that's 3% of the US population, participated in resort-based winter sports during 2020-2021. And that's from a Washington Post article titled "Winter is Right Around the Corner. Are You Ready for Ski and Snowboard Season?" written by Reitzell Walker. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce our panelists here today so that we can jump right into the conversation around what to expect for winter 2021 and 22 and what they're doing to ready their states for probably a pretty healthy visitor rate once again in the coming winter season. So today's panelists include Molly Mahar, who's president of Ski Vermont, Melanie Mills, president and CEO of Colorado Ski Country, Nathan Rafferty, president and CEO of Ski Utah, and Michael Reitzell, president of Ski California. Welcome, all of you. It's so great to have you here again.
Thank you.
I also just want to make a little note. The group has continued to meet. That was one of the highlights for me going into this in January together, is the four of these states coming together and having regular meetings. And that has continued and will probably continue. So it's just great to have you all here. And I'm just going to dive right in and let's take this first one as a round robin. If you could share the current protocols for COVID in your state, that would be a great way for us to just start the conversation and kind of lay the foundation for today. Who would like to start?
I can start. This is Nathan from Ski Utah. Our protocols people ask me what I'm most excited for about this ski season, and it's loading chairlifts at full capacity. So our outdoors, I think like a lot of my compatriots on the screen here today, our outdoor situation is going to look a whole lot like pre-pandemic levels. None of our resorts are required mass outdoors. I don't think ghost lanes are going to be around, and the only restrictions outdoors will be some really limited restrictions, slightly smaller numbers on the tram at Snowbird. I think they're talking about down from 100 people to 80 people on the tram with masks strongly encouraged, and then a handful of our resorts that have gondolas will either strongly encourage or ask guests to wear masks on the gondolas. But other than that, it's going to be back to normal for outdoor. And then there's a really, the thing that that's different for us this year is last year, everybody's kind of COVID protocols were to the max and they were all pretty similar. We're finding now that they're just all over the place. So a lot of different rules inside for our members, and we're asking people to, our motto is the know before you go, working with NSA and understanding that they're going to find different protocols, everything from no masks indoors to asking people to wear masks indoors to a vaccination, proof of vaccination at one resort at Park City Mountain, part of all of Vail's resorts. And that's at their kind of cafeteria style, large quick service lodges. But other than that, we're looking forward to a more normal-ish ski season.
How about you, Molly? Would you like to chime in?
Sure. A lot similar to what Nathan just said. Last year was pretty challenging for Vermont resorts for a number of reasons. We had probably some of the most stringent operating requirements, and one of the biggest things was we had a strict quarantine requirement for interstate travel, and we also had the Canadian border closed completely. So those were some pretty big challenges for a state that gets the majority of its skier visits from out of state. And we don't have those restrictions this year. So that is really the big news out of Vermont, and we're really excited about that. I think what we'll see, we definitely took a hit in skier visits last year, but all the preseason indications are strong and looking good. And we actually started our season earlier this month when Killington kicked it off on November 5th. So in terms of COVID protocols, very similar to what Nathan said. We had state mandated requirements last year that we don't have this year. But that said, the ski areas have been talking together and as they've been formulating their policies. And so outside, no mask requirements, lifts loading to normal capacity, as Nathan mentioned. And then inside, it's either required masks or strongly recommended. And we're just looking forward to being able to welcome everybody back. The Canadian travel restrictions, we understand, are going to be, the testing requirements for Canadians to get back into Canada are going to be relaxed a little bit. So that should really help a lot. So we're bullish on the winter.
So happy to hear that, especially with the November 5th opening at Killington. That's great. How about you, Michael? Can you fill us in on what Ski California is up to?
Sure. It's going to be a little redundant, which I suppose is a good thing, that everyone's going to get outside and feel normal, I think, which is the best thing. California removed their specific ski area guidance in June, and we were certainly hopeful that it would remain that way, and it has. So what it's going to look a bit like is outdoors, I'd say across the board, up and down the whole state, is going to look pretty close to normal. I can't really think of too many things outdoors that will be different. People should probably still remember to bring a mask. I think that's a good thing. Keep pointing that out, as you shouldn't show up to the resort assuming you're not going to have to put one on, because you may very well somewhere. So definitely have one. But yeah, like Nathan said, just excited to go outdoors and have it be normal and not pull up to a lift line and feel bad for everyone that's just going like this constantly to the people that are in line. So that'll be good. But it is going to be different inside and different depending on what resort you go to, in part because the counties have very different restrictions right now. And that's kind of what the state did. The state decided to turn things over to the counties when it came to different protocols. So in the Tahoe area, for example, we've got Placer County and Nevada County, and the rules are different with each one. So the resorts are having to really work to be compliant with each one of those. So to Nathan's point about know before you go, we're still going to be, that was the message last year, and it's still the message this year. And the key thing about it, I think, different is last year you could know before you go to just about everybody. You just knew the same thing, but now you need to really pay attention to each individual resort and what they're trying to tell you about what their protocols may be, because it could be very different from resort to resort.
That's a perfect point for me to ask Melanie how things are going in Colorado.
Well, a lot of the same things that my friends from Utah, Vermont, and California have noted. One thing I would add is the COVID situation is obviously still evolving in the US. And so what we say today could change depending on what happens. Colorado had some of the strictest protocols last year of any state, particularly when it came to capacity restrictions. And we were really very ratcheted down by statewide requirements there. None of those requirements will be in place this year. The outdoor experience will very much resemble pre-pandemic times. And I know everyone is looking forward to being able to smile at our guests and at each other again this year and have that really be seen. Like California, there will be some local indoor masking requirements and some resort-specific, activity-specific vaccine requirements, whether that's for powder cat tours where you might spend a good chunk of the day in a cat cabin with a group of other folks, whether that's Cloud9 at Aspen Highlands, where you might be dancing on tables and spraying champagne around. There are going to be some specific places where vaccine requirements will be in place, but across the board, we look pretty similar to Utah, Vermont, and California in that it's a know before you go situation. And everybody ought to stay in ready position because things could evolve as the season goes on.
Thank you so much. So this is a great jumping off point for what I think is going to be the biggest collaborative effort for everybody on the call today, as well as our panelists who are already collaborating, and that is communications and probably marketing as an extension of that. So as we were doing a quick rehearsal before we hit go live today, we were talking a lot about the challenges of workforce. This is hitting every industry, and we are in the winter outdoor recreation space, all about the consumer experience. That goes right back to our workforce. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to talk about those two key items in the call today. And I have a feeling this might make up the bulk of our conversation. Number one, I'd just like to ask our panelists if they can talk about their situation in terms of workforce. Last year, if you'll remember when we were talking together, we talked a lot about the grace, the gratitude, the patience that we needed to have with our workforce. And obviously really hoping that consumers would have that as well, which is now part of our, I think, communications. So I guess I'd like to just start by talking with you, Melanie, since you're one of the ones who kind of, set this alight for me. What are you planning on doing, or what is your state thinking in terms of workforce and the effect on that of consumer experience? That's something that I think that we could really rally behind in terms of making it better for everybody.
Yep. Workforce is a challenge across all of our states and across the industry this year. We are all, every one of our areas has different challenges with hiring, despite the fact that everyone is paying considerably higher wages than they have paid in the past. There just is a shortage of employees out there who are either coming back to work at ski areas or coming to work at ski areas for the first time. And the shortages are showing up in different areas, with food and beverage being one that seems to be a particular pain point. I think you will see some of the measures that ski areas undertook last winter in the way of more grab and go food, reserving your space to eat in advance, ordering in advance, those kinds of things will help with employee shortages. And, it's an area where we're collaborating again amongst ourselves. We're continuing to do our resort chiefs calls where the areas are all collaborating with each other, sharing ideas from, some options for incentivizing locals to rent a bedroom to a ski area employee and get some turns in return for that, to expansion in every way imaginable of employee housing. It seems like if we've got a bed to provide to employees, it's a little bit easier to hire them. And then Nathan last year really coined the phrase patience and gratitude. And, you know, we need to encourage our guests to practice patience and gratitude when they're at ski areas. And it appears that we're shorthanded, and all of us on this webinar today as industry leaders need to lead the way with visible, vocal patience and gratitude with ski area employees this winter, because the challenges for employees are not going to be telling people to keep their masks on, but they're going to be juggling more duties and a great deal of demand and enthusiastic visitors, but fewer employees in order to smooth the experience. So we're all in this together.
Thank you. That's how about Nathan, can you speak to that? Have you evolved your patience and gratitude to maybe be more of a workable solution, like, you know, putting into place as we go into the season here with the workforce around your state?
Yeah, you know, we produced a video that was well received last year that talked about patience and gratitude, and I'm thinking a bit about it now, and it probably has a bunch of people that were wearing masks while they were skiing, so we might need to update that, but I think we could definitely recycle that sentiment for sure. I serve on, like a lot of these guys on the call here, probably some broader tourism boards in our state. And I'll tell you, it's not, in terms of labor, it's not just a ski industry issue. And, you know, we have 5 national parks and all sorts of kind of red rock scene here in Utah, and the lodges down there. And some of those businesses are really hurting as well. We've been lucky to partner with a company called Seasonal Connect. And I think a lot of the ski areas or people watching this probably have done that as well, and trying to capture some of those H2Bs that are already in the country. And we've also been working with NSA and the team there has just been super as we work on some kind of longer term legislative solutions towards labor, but certainly no silver bullet. And I'm not sure that I have a whole lot to add more than what Melanie just said.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Molly? Do you have anything you'd like to chime in? It seems like your state has really experienced a lot of disruption, and you're almost starting over in a lot of ways with neuroplasticity with both guests and your workforce.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our workforce has declined by about 8%. That's what our labor statistics are telling us, and that's from a number of reasons. So it is hitting all sectors, and I think, you know, ski areas are looking at more cross training and trying to get more efficiency in their operations. You know, and that may mean that some of the food service operations or venues may not open at a ski area. They may not be open like they have been in the past. And just, you know, housekeeping is a big issue as well. So as you're staying in some of these properties, you know, you probably will not have daily housekeeping in your room. So it's just getting used to things like that, and just realizing that not all the services may be available, you know, to the degree that they have been in the past. There's been such a demand for the international workers. We typically don't hit the winter H-2B visa cap, or if we do, it's much later in the year. And this year we hit it, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago or so. So it just goes to show that there's really great, you know, so much greater demand on that workforce. But definitely agree that, you know, people need to bring a dose of patience, because the frontline staff, you know, they had a tough year last year. And you just have to recognize that they're doing their best to serve you, the guest, and to just bring some patience, and everyone will have a much better day.
And I have to ask, Michael, do you have anything to add, or is it kind of what you're seeing as well?
A lot of similarities, but I don't know if it's comforting to know that everyone has the same problems, or if that's a bigger concern that the problem is so big and so wide ranging that we have a pretty huge challenge in front of us. But I was even going to note that yeah, these things are not ski industry problems necessarily. And I think that's what makes it a big concern, is that this isn't something we as a group can necessarily get together and say, okay, we'll solve this problem. It's not like it's a grooming issue or a snow removal issue. It's the people, and it's about, their jobs and where they're going to live. And to not have control over all of that can be really challenging, especially on the housing front. I mean, I track what's happening with, say, the average price of a single family home in the communities where our resorts are. And, pre-pandemic, it was already, we'll call it somewhat high, but certainly at a level that could be managed. And now it is, I mean, there are some zip codes where the average single family home price is over $1 million. And what do you do with that? I mean, there's no way to have employees that any employees, frankly, that can really afford that. So it's a huge challenge across the entire nation. And, so it's going to be bigger than all of us to try to see if we can solve that problem. And just last, I'll say, maybe on a more positive note, hopefully, is that, we can, if we get more snow too, that's going to impact the services. That's going to put a lot more strain on the resorts. Like, that's what we all want. I mean, Nathan's true patience and gratitude is waiting for the big storms that go through California to get to Utah. And so I try to send as much love as I can to Utah. But we know if that goes big this year, it could mean that, that we're putting a lot more effort into getting the resort open. And thankfully, I think that's going to be the focus of our resorts, is the outdoor skiing experience first, because that's what we know people love and want. And then that may have an impact on services down the road.
And let's talk a little bit about that in terms of mountain improvements. And again, I'll tie this back into communications and marketing, because obviously when we invest in our operations, we want to get the word out on that, even though sometimes we might be a little worried about how many people that might bring to our mountain in, judging from today's conversation. But I'd love to just ask each of you, I've seen a lot of marketing campaigns about, anniversaries, improvement projects, and, lots and lots of things to kind of hype the on snow resort experience. Can you share a little bit from each of your states around that? And, maybe some of the things that you're doing around responsibly communicating that, kind of taking a page from the playbook we're talking about right now. I mean, some of these campaigns obviously have still yet to go, and they're probably well underway in terms of being built, but it would be awesome if we could talk a little bit about the improvements that you're making for consumer experience and how you plan on marketing those. Why don't we start with Nathan?
Sure, thanks. We don't have a long list of capital improvements in our state. A handful of new lifts. Sundance was recently purchased, and new owners there are starting to pump some capital into that resort. And it's a smaller spot, but they've got 2 new chairlifts. We'll call it a chairlift and a half. One's kind of a return chair. And Snow Basin's got a new chairlift as well, which would be exciting. I think we're going to probably see more of these CapEx improvements, pretty significant ones next year. We get out from underneath this COVID cloud, and people can kind of concentrate on pumping some of those dollars into the mountains. Tons of snowmaking and grooming equipment updates, not terribly sexy, but as I once heard somebody say, it was probably actually a snowmaking sales guy that said the only thing more expensive than snowmaking equipment is not having snowmaking equipment. So important to have that, especially years like this, where we had a ton of great snow in October, got everybody really excited, running for the ski shops and buying season passes, but things warmed up a little bit around here, and we're in a cold snap now and blowing a ton of snow. And always in this industry, I think the thing that's going to move the needle the most is coming from Mother Nature in the sky. So I'm sure it's on its way soon. Some expanded night skiing up at Brighton, although we're seeing some delays in shipping. I know these guys were excited to get nights up, new lights up and expanding their night skiing, and their lights happen to be parked out in the ocean in a container ship somewhere. So I'm not sure the latest status on that. They'll drag them over the snow and get them going at some point this season, I think. But again, I think I would look for some big CapEx improvements next season.
Okay. Melanie, how about Colorado? Do you have any updates for us in terms of improvements?
Yeah, the story is somewhat similar to Utah's in that there's been a great deal of investment in snowmaking. Overall, relative to Molly's situation in Vermont, only between 11 and 12% of our skiable terrain in Colorado has snowmaking on it. And so we have a long way to go in investments on that front. And we're seeing a lot of them. That is helpful when the temperatures and cooperate. And we're hoping we'll see more of that soon so that we can get in some big, long stretches of snowmaking. We've also seen over the last couple of years, and this year in particular, lots of new food and beverage outlets. We're seeing that across the industry. Some are outdoor based, some have very specific food themes, whether that's kind of a Austrian Alpine menu or other more limited menu focused types of items. And it's going to be interesting to see how we juggle that with the workforce challenges that we're experiencing. But there has been a lot of investment on that front, and it's great to see the variety there. One item that I just wanted to follow up with our prior discussion on that will affect all of us is the nationwide retirement of snowplow drivers, and how we're all going to have to be more patient after big storms about getting to our ski areas, because our states are all experiencing a significant shortage of snowplow drivers.
That is an interesting point to consider for sure. Thank you for bringing that up. Who else would like to chime in about other, resort improvements or campaigns or anniversaries, et cetera, that might be happening within their state? And hopefully we'll be able to get people up to the mountains knowing that. That's a really incredible fact that you just shared, Melanie. But who else would like to chime in on this from Vermont or California?
I can jump in. I think snowmaking is definitely a big one. When I look at our resorts and sort of their what's new, that's really where a lot of the investment is happening. And whole different conversation about climate if we want to get into that somewhere else. But I think that's resorts being smart and prepared. And then I think that we haven't really talked about this so much yet. We're talking about COVID, but just investments in technology. Our consumer has an expectation at this point of being more technologically advanced and making the process a lot easier to do things. And if we're working on guest experience and that's our focus, then making it easier on them to do things and also getting them more information and having a channel to do that that's easy for them. I see that across a number of our resorts is that one of the things that worked out well from COVID, frankly, was, hey, let's get some technology rolling, and we are sticking with that. And I think it's great for the industry because we tend to be a little behind, I think, sometimes because our focus is on that natural environment. Well, that's why we love the sport, but bringing technology into the fold is such a key component of it all. And I think we will continue to do that. And I think our consumers will certainly ask for it.
That is such an excellent point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Do you have anything that you'd like to add on this, Molly?
Yeah, I would just echo what Mike was just saying about technology. I think the pandemic has definitely been a catalyst for that, and particularly in some of our smaller to mid-size areas that we're able to introduce, the ability to facilitate pre-buying lift tickets and making reservations and things like that they hadn't really invested in before. Also seeing more outside, grab and go food outlets, and then the ability to order ahead and then just be able to and eat. And I think one of the things that we've had a lot of focus on here is just our outside spaces, making them easier for people to hang out outside and be comfortable. Things like, windbreaks and, maybe fire pits and things like that. And so just being able to expand our outside footprint a little bit more to take some of the pressure off of the inside spaces and make it easier for people to hang out. And probably that's more of maybe a Vermont or East Coast thing because, the climate's a little bit different out with my Western friends. But I think, the combination of those things, being able to easily pick up food and then just hang out outside and be comfortable is something that we've seen for sure.
Then I would be remiss if I didn't ask, and you don't have to all, round robin on this, but I would love to hear from you if you have something that you think will be important for the membership to hear. But ultimately, last year, I think a lot was made out of just the notion of people doing, winter activities that maybe did not involve a lift. And obviously resorts wanted to be in front of that trend as well for many reasons, a lot of which we've just discussed. But have any of you seen anything noteworthy or anything that you think would be inspiring to share around your states and how they've maybe built out the experience for the guests to be beyond just lift served?
We're doing that a lot here in California. And it's interesting because we always are very focused on, hey, we're a ski area. And so that's what people are here to, they're here to ski and ride. And even if we had, say, that snow play experience or tubing or something like that, I think there's always this thought of maybe we make those people skiers and riders. Like that's the goal, is that we bring them up onto the mountain at some point. And while I think there's still some value in that, I think that there also needs to be some level of acceptance that there's a group of people out there that just want to do the stuff that doesn't require going up the hill. And that's okay. They're there to enjoy it. And maybe some of them are going to convert and say, hey, you know what? I do want to go up on that lift. I want to put on a snowboard. I want to put on a pair of skis. But hey, if you want to bring the whole family and just go, just tube or sled or whatever the other options are. And there's so many of them, I think, being brought into the fold. And then, hey, they're still going to go and, apparate tube is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. And I think that's something that we as an industry should just continue to embrace, that because I think that will also help with diversifying our clientele and being more inclusive of the people that come to the areas, that we're not saying, hey, you've got to go 2,000 feet up the hill and find your way down.
Exactly. That is such a great point. And the inclusivity piece is really important. We've seen through SIA's data, as well as, some other associations, that we definitely saw an influx of, people who are re-embracing winter outdoor recreation, enjoying it for the first time. And then obviously we have our diehards and our, local loyalists, if you will. But we do have a very new audience, I think, that will be visiting the experience that we're providing in the States. So that's a really excellent point. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add on that note in terms of like supporting inclusivity and welcoming the newcomer? Melanie, did you have something?
Sure, I would, put an exclamation point on everything that Mike said, and just note that we're making a real effort here in Colorado. Every time we put out a press release, every time we are talking about what's new at ski areas, we're trying to make sure that included in that conversation is something that's accessible for folks who are new to the sport, who might be accompanying people to a ski area that are not planning on skiing, whether that's talking about, the 200 new Adirondack chairs that we've invested in this year, or the great cocktail that's available for après. We're very consciously talking about those additional activities and options and the welcome that's available at our resorts for folks who aren't riding the lifts and skiing or riding down.
That's a great point. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I would just add that there's a real opportunity there. If we saw anything during the last year, it's this increased appreciation for the outdoors and the kind of freedom that it offers. And if we can't figure out a way to capitalize on that, I think we're really missing an opportunity. And, for sure, all of us were so focused on just running resorts and making that happen last year, keeping our head above water. But, I don't know that that's going to last forever with everybody getting back to kind of regular life at some point. So taking advantage of this increase in appreciation for the outdoors. Smart.
That definitely rolls up to the climate, which is a whole nother conversation that we will plan on having, just so everybody knows. It's too big to add to this one. Did you have something you wanted to add, Molly?
I was just going to say, yeah, with families traveling together and wanting to spend more time together, it's important that we make sure to convey that we have things for those folks in the family that may not be skiers or snowboarders. I just wanted to note too that we definitely saw more traffic to our cross-country ski areas last year, and that is often viewed as sort of a more accessible, because you don't have to learn how to, well, there's a little bit of downhill in cross-country, but it's a little easier to pick up. And I know they've certainly had, I think some of our areas anyway, we're seeing the supply chain issues impact their ability to increase rental fleets and things like that. So, but definitely seeing more interest in just that being outdoors and getting some exercise in that way as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's the number one thing, as we may have revolving workforce or workforce coming in with a new state of mind, if you will, kind of not really sure what they're going to encounter from the guests. I think that, reminding them and helping them communicate kind of that very welcome vibe, if you will, like would be super important to do. And all of the suppliers and retail operators, everybody really has an opportunity there to kind of create that just very welcoming and inclusive feel to this backdrop that these states are providing to so many newcomers and also our existing loyalists as well. I also wanted to make sure that I touched in with each of you on lodging and transportation. That was a big part of our conversation last time we were all together, was just the moving people around. And obviously, like with the, restraints put on lodging and hotel and everything else that consumers are used to having, that's really been disrupted. And I think that people are coming into this maybe with a different experience in mind, different expectation. And I was wondering if you all could speak to that. Anything from lessons to gear rentals, to retail operations, to lodging, just anything that's happening that you're seeing on the tourism boards that you're serving on, for example, that would be very noteworthy for the membership to hear today.
I would just say that we're, all these things are so tied together, especially with labor, and the few little murmurs I do hear are lodging and making sure there's enough labor to make sure that they can have 100% of their rooms available. And over the summertime, there were some that they chose to only sell 75% of the capacity of their rooms, because that's all they could keep clean. That's all they could service in terms of the restaurant. And, it's amazing how all this stuff is all tied together.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have anything they'd want to share on lodging or rentals or the retail operations? I know that's something that the membership's super curious about.
Yep. One thing that really carries over from last year in those areas, plan ahead. To the extent that there are supply chain issues with rental fleets, make sure you book your rentals well ahead of time. Plan ahead, book ski school ahead of time in the event that the number of folks visiting exceeds our ability to provide instructors. If you're booked ahead, you're gonna have a more predictable experience. And so I think that messaging, which very much was something we were all doing last year, will carry over again to this year.
That's a really important point. Does anyone have anything they want to share in terms of creative ways they're getting that message across?
I was just going to say that we're seeing more ability to reserve rentals here, where we hadn't had that so much, but we had some areas put that into practice last year, and that will definitely be carrying over, because it makes for a much more efficient process for the guests, certainly, and to Melanie's point, making sure that you can actually get rental equipment if it's in short supply.
Is anything like, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Going back to know before you go and plan ahead.
Yeah. And I think our consumer is just right there already doing that, especially if you look at like campground reservations, et cetera. I think they're pretty well trained at this point to know that they need to get in and book. And the piece that I think we can add is the know before you go, and making sure that everybody's consistent in terms of updating them on whether it's regional regulations. It sounds like it's migrated from the state to regions. That would be very important. And obviously a lot more consumers are using the app experience. So there's just a lot of things that I think suppliers and retailers and the on snow resorts can work through together to create a consistency, which ultimately is the container of trust that our people need to have, our guests to come to our resorts. So I think that's all super important. And, in terms of booking, I know one of the things that's been very, kind of really hammered into the consumer is kind of the end-to-end experience. And I don't know if anybody has anything of note to add on this, but it's basically enabling them to do everything seamlessly in terms of reservations. I think it was Michael who pointed that out. That is the consumer we're dealing with today. They hate obstacles in the way of their experience, and they have very little patience for it. And like balancing the message between that and asking them to have patience with us is really a challenging one. So I know all of you have extensive, marketing experience in your roles. Anything that you can share, or any pleas that you want to maybe put out there to other stakeholders and leaders listening today around ensuring that we have that consistent messaging, and we're really not having a fragmented experience from like research all the way to getting to have the experience on the hill.
Yeah, I'll go first as the one who has the least amount of marketing experience on this panel for sure. That's guaranteed. But I would say, that concept of plan ahead fits in with all of this. And it's not like, I don't think we should talk about this like it's a this year thing or even a last year thing. Like that's transformed into the industry going forward. Because that's just how we're going to shape the experience from here on out. Because look at when people go on a plane flight, that whole experience is about knowing before you go. Like, you have to know what time things are. You have to know if things are delayed. You have to know if there's traffic on the way to the airport. You have to know what you're bringing. You have to know what the weather is. Very similar to our industry, of course. So I think that's going to be very important for everyone to be getting across. And I think our resorts are doing a good job of that. I think they recognize the importance of over communicating with the guests. I think it used to be at times you didn't want to put too much out there, that maybe you were sharing too much information. They didn't want to hear it. But at this point, I think we learned last year that over communication is very beneficial. And then over communication also, in line with being transparent, super important. I mean, guests want you to tell them what's actually happening. Gone are the days of trying to convince someone that it's actually snowing on the mountain when it's just spitting a little bit of rain. Like, someone's there and they're going to take a picture of that. So it's that, that's that trust you talked about, Kristin, is having that with the guests. And that's how you're going to bring people back for that full experience. And last, and this is a little something off topic, was going to what we talked about before. I just wanted to mention transportation, because that was on one of our lists of topics. And last year, we talked very differently about transportation because it was different. There were things that were removed. And I think we need to get back to some of the talks about, hey, use public transportation. We're going to be promoting carpools again, like going back to those things that we maybe had to put on hold. And then adding to that, safety. I think safety is a big one, not just on the mountain, but road safety. With all these new guests that we have and this new experience, and that they're going to come up and just, hey, it's my new hobby. I want to go to the mountains. Well, in California in particular, last year, we actually had somewhat of a light year when it came to snow and road challenges. But if we have a year where we have, one of our, 700-800 inch seasons, we've got all these new people that are going to experiencing these things for the first time. And we need to make that easier for them and really, again, over communicate so they're prepared to deal with what some of those challenges are.
Those are excellent points.
I
Who
think
would like to add? Go ahead.
Just add quickly to what Mike said. To the extent that our industry can be consistent, I think really helps with the guest experience. And I know that's tough sometimes state to state and even from resort to resort. But what I feel, or when I see some of the frustration in guests, is when they get one thing at one place and another, and they just don't know what to expect. And I know it's not realistic to think that all of our businesses can run at the same level, but to the extent that we can have some kind of consistency, I think it's really helpful.
I wanted to pick up on Mike's thread about safety. You know, having been through, and not even through yet, but having been in the throes of a pandemic now for approaching 2 years, our guests are much more focused on safety than they ever have been before. And it's not just COVID safety and any measures that they need to know about there. It's bigger picture, it's ski safety. We've got lots of new folks at our mountains. We've got to talk about safety more. All of us actually on this call are working together on a safety video this year that we'll all be able to use and our resorts will be able to use. I think we've really elevated the conversation there, and we just have to be more transparent and talk about safety more, acknowledge the fact that skiing is risky, and really do our part and step forward a lot more than we used to in embracing the concern of our guests about safety.
Fantastic. So the four of you are coming up with a collaborative video on resort safety that really speaks to kind of 2021, 2022 in terms of what you're anticipating. That's exciting. When will it be coming out?
That's through
Not just
that's
Okay,
through
Nick.
the High Fives Foundation. They've been a great leader, and Melanie can talk about timing.
Yeah, I think we'll see that, if not late this year, early in the new year. And to give credit where credit is due, it's not just the four of us. It's really a broader effort across our state associations and with NSAA and the High Fives Foundation. We're really joining forces to get behind some ski safety messaging that I think it's exciting for us as an industry.
It absolutely is. And that's something we could help get the word out at SIA. So that's really fantastic to hear. We actually did have a question come in, so I wanted to address that. Can you speak to pricing increases of lift tickets and how that impacts inclusivity? Strategies your organizations are engaging in with member resorts to address the ballooning price situation. In Vermont, for example, walk-up lift ticket prices are as much as 75 to 90% from 2016, 2017 prices, topping out at $184 a day. I think that is a valid one to address. Who would like to step in on that one? I guess it makes sense, Molly, since they're pointing out Vermont, if this is something you'd like to address.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're undergoing a shift in the industry in terms of, trying to move people to season passes. And that is part of what we're seeing. This pricing strategy is driving the daily access ticket prices up a little bit. And where that, while that's great if you're already a skier, it is a little bit more challenging if you're someone who's trying to get into the sport. Maybe you're not ready to buy a season pass yet. So I think there's more pressure on the ski areas for their intro programs and making sure that those have good price points and approachable price points. To the inclusivity piece, we have been working with our resorts to sort of understand the issue a little bit more, because it goes beyond price as well. And it's a marketing issue. It's, having these groups see themselves reflected in marketing messaging and reaching out to, making sure that we're being inclusive in terms of our media outreach. Like we had a media event the other day, and making sure that we're inviting, people of color to cover our sport. And so it's a big issue. And so just trying to understand it a little bit better. And I know the ski areas certainly are working with a number of these groups to help youth be able to access their ski areas more easily. But it's an ongoing sort of learning process, I think, and we're trying to help our resorts along the way to put some of these plans in place. And we're definitely making some progress, but we have a long way to go, I would say.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that? I mean, I think consumers are they're seeing so much in the way of inflation. They're reading about it. They're living it themselves. I think obviously like putting it out there and not addressing it isn't really the best strategy. I think it does make sense to talk about it, tying it to improvements or maybe safety measures. Like there's a lot that I think we could discuss and do there. Does anyone else want to talk at all about price increases and kind of balancing that out with inclusivity and any other just flags that you're experiencing around that? Because it is a very much a part of our life right now.
Just a couple of quick points. Agree that it's a really important issue. A number of us at the state level have kids programs that are aimed at making access to the sport very affordable for families with young kids. And it also is an important part of our know before you go, plan ahead messaging, because we've long said here, you don't go out to the airport and walk up to a ticket counter and say, give me a ticket to New York City. You're going to pay top dollar for that. If you want to visit a ski area at peak periods over holidays, the pricing is going to be higher, but there really are many opportunities to ski at a very accessible price point if you plan ahead. And whether that's early season opportunities, or whether those are products that ski areas roll out during the season itself to help fill in periods where their bookings are a little bit lower. There are some great deals to be had in the sport, and we just need to talk more about the fact that if you're looking for a price point deal, peak periods are not the time to find them. They aren't the time to find the best pricing deals in any sector of the economy. And we shouldn't apologize for that, but we can shine a spotlight more on the opportunities for folks to participate economically.
I think that's an excellent point. And it is one of the questions that we had too, is last time we gathered, we were talking about just the lack of opportunity for us to bring groups and tourists and schools back because of the restrictions we were facing and just sort of a challenge in planning. So maybe there's something that we could do to kind of couple these together, I think would be really great. Does anyone else want to comment on that? I got another question here as well.
I'll just add real quickly, all of our states have smaller kind of mom and pop ski areas that are a great place for people to learn at a lower price point. They're not going to offer the services of some of the big ski areas, but if you're talking about learning, in Utah, it's a company called Mountain Capital Partners. They own Nordic Valley and Brian Head, and they've got free skiing for kids 12 and under. I don't know what industry does that, and pretty amazing. And especially a place like Nordic Valley, a smaller ski area with 1, 2, 3, 4 lifts, and the price point is certainly lower.
Great point. I'm going to address this next question because we're kind of coming up on the top of the hour here, and it's a really good question. We are seeing an unprecedented flow of federal dollars into rural communities, CARES Act, EDA grants, once in a generation flood of federal dollars. How is the industry working with rural communities to help ease some of the challenges facing ski resorts in housing and labor? So obviously we have addressed this, but we haven't looked at it through the lens of the federal dollars. We might be a little bit ahead of that in terms of it really landing and taking shape, but it is a valid question, and I would love to get anybody's feedback on that. I hear crickets.
I'll take a swing at it.
Okay.
We're in conversation actually with our state's economic development office about what some opportunities might be to put some of those dollars towards housing and workforce issues. We also are going to be wrangling with, I can't tell you what the outcome will be yet, some of the issues associated with short-term rentals and their impact on all of our communities. We'll be dealing with some of those issues in our legislature this year and trying to identify whether there are more ways that dollars can be directed to incentivizing more workforce housing. You know, the challenge with workforce housing is that bringing it online quickly is difficult. You can't just throw dollars out there and have large numbers of workforce housing units 3 weeks from now. It takes time. And I think we're all very focused on those issues. And your point is a well-taken one, which is that there are federal dollars out there that we may be able to tap into, but we also have communities that have all sorts of needs in all sorts of buckets that they're hoping to address with those federal dollars. And part of our job is to be sure that at least some of those go towards addressing some of the housing and workforce challenges. But they're not, those dollars are not going to be a silver bullet to our challenges.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that? Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Molly.
would just add, you know, sort of hand in hand with that, and it has been a focus of some of these dollars, are looking at sort of the infrastructure that we need in some of these communities, like wastewater, drinking water, those types of things, stormwater. You know, if we're building more, we need to be able to address some of these other issues. And you know, we are hopeful that there will be the availability. Well, we know that there will be the availability for some funding some of these projects, which will be important to getting more housing built. And then workforce too, I think is another one, and I'm not sure how that's going to come out, but we're definitely looking at sort of these workforce, you know, workforce readiness, and how can we kind of use some of these dollars in these programs to try to expand the workforce and keep more people in Vermont. I know that's one of our issues.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I just want to Melanie's point about the time it takes, and I don't know about the other states on this call, but California is probably the worst in terms of the ability to move something forward with the amount of red tape and hurdles that are put in place to actually get something done. It's a huge challenge to even propose something. And then it's got to go through how many years? Well, we got to, you know, take close analysis of the area itself. And I mean, and by then you've just spent so much money that all this, you know, this federal money that can be gone in a hurry, and then the projects don't even get off the ground. And that's really frustrating, because we would love to be part of that. I'd say where I'm seeing the most, you know, push on that is on the local level. So our resorts are trying to work within the communities that they're in. It's a little tougher on a statewide level, because a state as large as California. So we do try to focus on, you know, if you can focus on, it's North Tahoe, it's South Tahoe, it's Mammoth, it's Southern California. You know, they're different places. Frankly, they all have the same problem. So, you know, we want to try to work on the state level if we can, to the extent we can push those through. I mean, we had 27 housing bills that passed in California this past year aimed at making it easier, but I looked through them and I'd say that they weren't great in terms of making it easier for our rural communities. So that's a challenge we still have in front of us. It's a big one, and it's one that I know, as Melanie said, if it takes 5-6 years for these types of projects to happen, what are we doing in the 5-6 years leading up to that?
That sounds like a topic that we could probably do an entire panel on, and that is a really great question. So I would like to just maybe not necessarily table it, but let you know that that's something that I think, you know, we would like to provide follow-up on. So I'm happy to communicate with the individual who asked that question and provide some, you know, access potentially to you all, or just to SIA resources for that. And we also had a couple other questions come in that we aren't going to have time to address, but I'm happy to route those to the, you know, through SIA and get you as much information as possible to the people we weren't able to address the questions from. So with that, I want to make sure everybody's on time today. And I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their incredibly busy pre-holiday week this week to both prepare and show up for this. I know that the membership got so much out of it when we did this last time. And I thought this was a great touch base in terms of just level setting and retrenching where we're all going together as we work to serve this consumer across all of the channels and all of the locations that they're going to expect us to be remarkable in this year. So thank you, each one of you, and thank you to everybody who joined us here today. Ideally, we'll be able to follow up. I would love to do some kind of a mid-season follow-up if it's not too crazy with each of you as well. And best of luck to you in your continued collaboration. The 4 states collaborating, I think, is one of the happiest stories of COVID. And I know that a lot of good is coming out of that collaboration for the entire industry community. So thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great season.
Yep. Thanks.